Viva Chile, viva Chile, a Chile quiero, chileno yo soy.
All right, we're back here on Red Hot Chili. Well, I wanted to continue a few things before we get to our interview. Wanted to mention about the Corruption Perceptions Index. You know, Chile is ranked number 22 in the world by the Germans and their Transparency International organization. It's right up there with the United States and Great Britain, if you're interested in where they are. New Zealand and Denmark always seem to be the top spots in the world, but Chile is way ahead of everybody in South America, except Uruguay is not too far behind as far as that being a transparent country. However, that's being challenged now that the left is in. Of course, we would never think the leftists are corrupt. Now, I'm not, as a libertarian, I'm also not going to tell you that, right-wing American conservatives and Republican Party are not corrupt. Now, don't get me wrong. Just here in Chile, remember, there's a lot of libertarians among the right, so I have to be very cautious. Here in Chile, I am a rightist, and I realize in the United States I would not necessarily be that, because as a libertarian, we're sort of outside of either the right-left spectrum. We take from both ends on some particular things. But economically speaking, certainly we're to the right in general. And in the Corruption Perceptions Index, they point out that people now are really believing that corruption is going to double in the next few years because of the new left-wing or center-left government of Michelle Bachelet. They have a bunch of interesting data to point this out in their survey. So the especially corrupt parts, or people actually believe that they're especially corrupt, include the municipalities, which are like cities, of course, here in Chile, or comunas as they're called. The Congress, especially the House of Representatives, that is the Cámara de Diputados, and the public enterprises like the mines. And we actually have Codelco, which is the largest, or now neck and neck for being the largest mine in Chile and probably in the world. And Codelco is run by the state. It's ridiculous. I mean, why do we need the government to run this stuff? The same thing with Correos de Chile, the post office, which competes against private firms, and ENAP, or ENAP, I should say in Spanish, which is the national oil company. Why do we need that? You know, it's an oil and gas company, fixed prices. Anyway, those are criticized too, but mainly, you know, the Congress and municipalities really took the brunt of this study, and I think it's something to be watching out for, a concern for us here in Chile, which is generally a very transparent society. Also wanted to make a couple comments about Valparaiso today. As I live over here in Viña, and of course I lived here in the 90s there for a little while, in 96, but you know, I never really studied the history of Valparaiso as much as I have now. I put a blog entry up about evangelicals who came originally there during the great booming period when you know, all the ships went around the Strait of Magellan, and the British ships, you know, were docking in Valparaiso. It was the most important Pacific port in the world. No matter where, including San Francisco, it was more important here. And it was a time in which I found through a recent study that were just loaded with French people, Italians, Scottish, and in the census it just distinguishes Scottish and English at the time, as well as characteristic other peoples from around the world, but especially those groups, and a lot of Germans. I almost forgot them. The Germans came in addition to the Germans that had already been in the South, and it made for a very bustling, cosmopolitan area where, you know, much like, you know, Chicago or other places in the U.S. where you actually have barrios or neighborhoods where they speak their own language, and still to this day they identify with those ethnic backgrounds, although they all are now well assimilated, if I can use that word, here into the culture. But Valparaiso is a killed city. That's what I decided to call it, the killed city, because in 1914, when Panama was officially opened, the canal, this city died. It was killed. Now, it was almost killed before that, and with an 8.2 earthquake in 1906, when we found, or where there were 3,000 people killed. Some of them by the earthquake, buildings falling all over the place on top of people. No tidal wave apparently, but it ruptured a bunch of gas lines. The British had carefully installed all sorts of modern conveniences in Valparaiso, one of which was a gas line. Electricity has just recently come on the scene. And remember, that came in Baltimore around 1885. So this, that was coming in too, but the gas leak and the explosions and stuff that came after that were just devastating, and 3,000 people were killed. So, 100 years later, we have this fire. Not that many people were killed at all, but it took 2,900 homes burned. But that was right before Panama, that 1906 earthquake. They were just getting on their feet, and all of a sudden Panama opened, and everybody just kind of closed up and left, and a lot of buildings haven't been painted since. And today, Valparaiso is generally an eyesore. I mean, it's full of graffiti. All the wonderful European buildings in the history have gone downhill. It's a great example of a killed city. And the good that was in Valparaiso was basically moved over to Viña del Mar, and a lot of that's been bolstered by Santiago vacationers and tourists from other countries. Valparaiso is still interesting to see. It's interesting to imagine what it was like to live over there, 100, 150 years ago when the British were ruling the sea waves and the French and all the trading that was going on. But nowadays, it's definitely not a place to go if you're an expat. It wouldn't be except for the rare cases of really artistic people that have this vivid imagination, what it could be or was or whatever. Most of you are not going to want to be in Valparaiso. Sometimes I have clients that say, well, I want to become a resident down there and go live in Valparaiso. And I said, I don't think so. I mean, and I don't know what your wife's like, pal, but you're probably not going to like to live in Valparaiso. Now, you might be. I mean, there are different strokes for different folks. There's no arguing with taste, as Gary Becker, a famous Nobel economist who recently died, says. There's no arguing with tastes. If somebody likes to live in that, fine. But just from the people I've met, the hundreds of people I've met down here, I would say that you're not going to like Valparaiso, so forget it. Cross it off the list. Come right up to Viña del Mar instead. All right, since I mentioned the residency program, let me just say one thing. I get all sorts of mail from people that want to come down and be residents and they want to use our service. And the residency service can be found at chile-consulting.cl. It's a good program where you have great success getting people the visas that they need. But it's just spiking lately. I don't know why. It spiked after Obama got elected, and now it's spiking again. It got people all over the place wanting to come in and be residents. People, look, I don't have time to explain the whole program to you because you don't have time to read the website. That's what people actually do. They write to me, they offer to take me out to dinner, they say, can I just call you for 5 minutes? What I started doing is a policy, and since they really nagged me, some of the folks, I said, look, all right, just send me a MoneyGram for $100 and I'll let you talk to me for 5 minutes. And then I watch them get offended, like, oh, why would I do that? Why would I give you? Well, I'm not asking to talk to me. You are. And if you want to talk to me, that's the cost. Why? Because I get inundated with stuff, folks, all the time. If you're interested in the residency program, go to chile-consulting.cl, read what it is, and send in your program fee. If you don't trust us, or you're worried, or if that's a lot of money for you, it's probably not the right program for you anyway. Go do it another way. I don't know what that way is, but figure it out on your own. If you want to use the service, the instructions are there. You pay for the program up front, and we'll take care of you like VIP. So I underscore that because this has been a real heavy week for people, about doing stuff about the residency show. All right, I'm already almost through the second segment. And here in studio with me is Luke Crowley. And so, am I pronouncing that right, Luke? It's Crowley, is that true?
Crowley.
Crowley. Yeah, I had a professor, Charles Rowley, and just lacked the C there, and he pronounced Rowley. So I almost said I was saying Crowley instead of Crowley. But anyway, welcome to the show. Now, you're living here in Reñaca. Tell us about your experience so far, how long you've lived in Chile.
I've been here 3 months. I mainly came down here for a entrepreneurial program called Exosphere. Got here about a month early, traveled up down the coast. I actually agree with what you say about Valpo. It's very artistic, a lot of beautiful graffiti, very nice for photo ops, great restaurants, but that's pretty much where it is.
And there's sectors that are some Italian, some British. You can look at the architecture. The buildings look like they're right out of Europe, but they're just so ugly because they're graffitied and just not well cared for.
Yeah, I see certain spots like getting, they have like one little tourist section, and it's a really great spot to visit. I myself wouldn't want to live there. I really like Reñaca, and I really like Viña a lot.
Now, you've been in Santiago too. What's your take on the difference between the two towns, and why do you like it here better?
Well, I'm from New York, and I worked in Manhattan. But my house is in the country, so I have a preference towards kind of smaller towns and more openness. And when you're in Reñaca area, you're right by the ocean. You have all these beautiful beaches, and it's just a more open feel. And in Santiago, just reminded me of Manhattan, which is great for some, but it's just not my preference. I prefer the Reñaca, Viña area.
Now, do you have to work? Are you retired, or why? Because most people live in Santiago because they have to for employment.
No, right now I am changing. I am actually hitting the reset button on my life. I was an electrician in New York City, and I started getting into all these different ideas in 2008. When the market was crashing, I thought the world was ending. Started becoming libertarian, changing my views, me and my life going through a lot of different things, a lot of different ideas. So we eventually, recently actually, about a year, maybe 6 months to a year ago, started figuring out, okay, well, I know all this stuff, I know what's going on, but what do I actually want to do? What action do we want to take? So I tried the prepping thing and the fear, like, circle, I call it, where you're basically running around the internet, watching YouTube videos, just freaking out all the time about what's going on in the U.S. and around the world. And I said, oh, I can't do it anymore. I got to take real action. So that's when I started finding programs. One in particular is absolutely fantastic, called Workaway, where you actually go away. This is for people that don't have a lot of money, which I don't have a lot of money. So go away and you trade your labor for a place to stay. And they feed you sometimes too.
Well, that's a great idea. In fact, we want to talk more about that as well as some of your other personal experiences here, like how you're doing with Spanish. We're going to do that when we get back from this break. You're listening to Red Hot Chili with Dr. John Coben, with guest Luke Crowley today, and we'll be back in just a minute.